Welcome to the Adventure Pro podcast. Interviews, stories, and inspiration from amazing people that have made adventure their business. Today on the podcast, we have Mike Raine. Mike, welcome to the podcast. Can you tell listeners a little bit about yourself and what you're up to?
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. I'm Mike Raine. I'm probably most well known as the author of Nature of Snowdonia. And from that, in my part-retired life, I run workshops and CPD events, principally for mountain leaders and mountaineering instructors. But anybody who's interested in what I'm doing is welcome to come along. Some of them are technical workshops, sort of ML rope work, teaching navigation, that kind of thing, but most of it revolves around aspects of nature. I'm on kind of a mission that people taking other people out into the mountains, the uplands, the countryside, should have the best understanding of that environment they can have. So through the workshops, through the book, through other mediums such as podcasting and Facebook and social media, I try to help mountain leaders and mountaineer instructors to be the best they can about the places they're operating in.
So why do you think that's important then? Because I think there's going to be lots of listeners today that are at various stages within their outdoor career, maybe they want to follow a similar path to you in the instructor sense and becoming a leader in the outdoors. But why is that important? Because we're very familiar with you go and do a course and you do rope work and all those things that you mentioned, navigation. But why is it important we understand the aspects that you specialise in?
There's several different ways of answering that, but let me just try and focus on a mountain leader, for example. On a mountain leader training course, whatever your trainers say, and they will talk about leadership and the environment, you will take away the message you need to be better at navigation and better at rope work. And clearly you need to practice those hard skills and get good at those hard skills. However, once you qualify as a mountain leader, you're suddenly in the upland environment with a group of people who may not have been there before. And you're highly unlikely to be doing much navigating because you're much more likely to be following a path or going somewhere you know, and you're very unlikely to be using the rope. I'm not saying you never need to do those things, but they're much less common once you qualified. However, what you have got is a group of people who are new to this place. You need to know something about this place. You need to be a little mini expert on this place, because what you've got to do is look after these people all day, entertain these people, and hopefully just educate them a little bit about the place we're in. I mean, most of the places we go hill walking or climbing, we are the majority group there. We don't see many other people there apart from hill walkers, climbers, runners, people out doing recreation and exercise. However, there's a whole load of other people having an interest in that environment, not least farmers, conservationists, and so on and so forth. So rather than just dominating in numbers, I think we need to make sure people are aware of these other groups who have an interest in the uplands. And by doing that, maybe, just maybe, we will start to be able to contribute a little bit more to the debate on how the uplands look and how the uplands are managed, because for too long, despite being the mainland users up there, we really have very little say in what it looks like and how it's managed.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because having gone through some mountain leader training myself many years ago, I distinctly remember on the training and on the assessment, we're expected to know a little bit, and everyone knows a little bit about sphagnum moss and a little bit about ferns and the classics, the classics that everyone comes up with. But it was always a sort of grey area in the training. And I can see the value of it completely in what you've just said there. It's testament to that. But that's fascinating. Great. So if someone wants to come and find out a little bit more about the uplands and what you do, then what does that look like? What does that look a day to day in the life of Mike?
Yeah, so in this modern multimedia world, it can look like lots of different things, like podcasts and YouTube videos and social media postings and books. But the sort of the cream really is coming on a workshop. And I personally would like to see mountain leaders, mountaineer instructors doing some sort of environmental workshop every year. It's not something you just go and do and tick a box. It's something that's continually developing, and it's not just about the details. Of course, it's nice to know a few species and what they're useful for, and that makes an entertaining conversation with the people you're leading. But it's about that bigger picture as well, how we fit into that big picture and how that species fits into that big picture, and just growing your understanding of the environment. So on a workshop, let's say a typical Nature of Snowdonia workshop, we'll do a little introduction to geology, and I will give attendees some tools to help them observe the rocks in the landscape. So rather than walking around saying this is a bit of gritstone, this is a bit of limestone, this is a bit of rhyolite or whatever, we actually look at the rocks and then we can tell the story of the rock. And that seems to work much better for mountain leaders, mountaineering instructors, rather than the sort of classic geological introduction of starting with plate tectonics, starting with the big picture and coming down to the products of that. What most hillwalkers or climbers will do is pick a stone up and say, well, what's this and where does it come from? So I try and enable mountain leaders to have some understanding, not necessarily the full story, but an understanding of how it's quite complicated, how that stone got there and how time's a big factor. And we'll do similar on glaciation. We'll do a little bit on mosses, ferns, obviously flowers that are growing, birds, whatever you see. And that was completely the ethos behind the book Nature of Snowdonia, was to go walking for a couple of years and just take a picture of everything I saw, rather than have loads of stuff in a book that you're never going to see. So if you buy a bird book or a flower book, it's often Britain and Western Europe. So you'll work really hard to identify a particular species and look at the distribution and find it doesn't exist where you are. So the idea was to put stuff in a book that you're actually going to see, and that's what we try and focus on when we're out and about.
Sure. So sticking with the book then, when was the book published, Mike?
The first edition was 2009, I think, or 2010, and it really was a collection of photographs with something about them. I wasn't completely sure who would buy the book. I had this lovely idea that all climbers and hill walkers would suddenly want to know everything about the Nature of Snowdonia because they spend so much time out there. But that's kind of neglecting the idea that a lot of us just do it for the adventure, for the physical side of things. And I think that's got to be respected by everybody. So for a few years, it had nagged away at me. There've been a couple of reprints. We made the odd tweak, and I eventually said to the publisher, Franco Ferraro of Pez de Press, I want to redo it. I want to redo the whole thing. So the second edition is almost a new book, and it's got a voice. It's got a voice that talks to mountain leaders and mountaineering instructors. And I try and write it as though I'm talking to that individual mountain leader or mountaineering instructor, rather than sort of general, a general audience of passers-by, if you like.
Yeah. So ultimately, if people are going into the outdoors and into the mountains for the first time, they're going to be the people that are taking these people out. So it just makes sense that they have a better understanding, and they've got that textbook, as it were, so they can refer to it. Oh, fabulous. I definitely need to read your book. Definitely. Yeah, brilliant.
Hello from the website.
I'm interested about the sort of publishing process, because I've got a limited amount of knowledge. I've done self-publishing before. I've got a couple of books on Amazon and various places online. I'm interested to hear really what does that process look like? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel they have a book in them and they want to get that out there. So how does it work? How did it work with yours?
Yeah, for me it's quite a painful process. Right. I've always got something to say, so I've always got something to write. But I'm not brilliant at writing, and I really have to work at it. And one of the nicest things anybody said was, I went to a talk by somebody called Owen Shears, who's quite a well-known author. And he just said, writing is rewriting. So if you set off planning to write anything, just factor in that you're going to write it twice, unless you're particularly gifted, and give time to do that. So I definitely remember the first book, I was really fed up with it. And when Franco suggested changes, I just said, yeah, whatever. Whereas with the second book, I finished it and then had a break and then tried to go back. It's still hard to go through yourself because you read what you think you've written rather than what you've actually written, which is why, unless you're very good, using a publisher's recommender, because then you've got an editor who's a different person to a proofreader. And my editor is Franco, and he actually knows what I'm talking about. So he will ask really good questions. Did you mean this or did you mean that? So it is a painful process. The funniest anecdote is working for it's voluntary for the Climbers Club. So I remember working on one of their guidebooks for Cornwall, and the Crags Fox Promontory, if anybody goes, because there's a little warning here. There'd been a rockfall, quite a severe rockfall, which had affected some of the routes. So I was really proud of myself. I religiously went down there with a couple of friends, Mike Hamill and Shane Orley, and we reclimbed all the routes and checked all the grades and all the descriptions, and we were chuffed to bits with the work we've done. The editor, who was like light years ahead of us in terms of editing and English, a guy called Nigel Coe, he just asked me one question. He said, was the girdle affected? And I'm like, I have no idea whether the girdle was affected. Like, who climbs the girdle? I don't care. So I remember just saying, no, the girdle wasn't affected, Nigel. To this day, I have no idea if it was or wasn't. Yeah. So, yeah, writing can be quite hard work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of to-ing and fro-ing, and you really do need to lock yourself away from the internet in a quiet space and set yourself little goals, the 1,000 words a day sort of goal, whatever's achievable.
Yeah. And in terms of then taking that to market, obviously you've gone down a traditional sense of with Pester Press and such. Would you ever consider doing it yourself and self-publishing a book?
I wouldn't, because it wouldn't suit me, but I know people who have done that and been very successful. But you've got to remember you've got distribution and marketing and all that sort of thing as well. Yeah. Which obviously Pester Press take care of that side of things. The real sort of trick today is I can get the books at a really good discount and sell them directly myself. So the more books I sell through my website, the more successful the book is for me. Whereas, just selling it through shops or the dreaded online retailers, then you don't get much money at all. That's a bit of a waste of time. So the idea of self-publishing is you make more money, but if you get to work with a good publisher, you'll have a good book that's been well edited and well proofread and beautifully put together. And then if you can sell it direct yourself, that actually works for the publisher and it works for the author. So it is a changing world, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you go into somewhere like, I don't know, Waterstones, any bookshop, they've only got one copy of each book. So when they've sold that copy, they've got to order another copy or two copies, unless, you're one of the big names, a John Grisham or somebody. That's, most of us, they've just got one copy. So you need to drive people to your sales medium yourself.
Yeah. And I'm guessing it's a book that's obviously better suited to a physical book as opposed to a Kindle or a PDF or...
Yeah, we get asked this a lot, Tom. Well, not a lot, actually, because most of the audience do quite like the book. But the way the online, the apps have gone is quite interesting, really, because we've been looking at this ever since we produced the first book. And now there are apps that rely on artificial intelligence. So you can take a picture of a flower and the app will work out what it is and tell you what it is. That's impressive technology that we as a very small scale couldn't match. The other way of doing it is just to put the book online. And there are some people who've done that. There's one or two free books online that are absolutely fantastic. Alan R. Walker, Mountain Flowers. Just find that and just download it to your phone. The trouble with the book on your phone, and I use the Colin Book of Birds a lot because it's got the bird sounds on as well. You need to know what you're looking for. So unless you know what it is you're looking for, a book on your phone doesn't help that much. A real book's easier to flick through, where the artificial intelligence does work, but of course you need reception. And then I think you still need to check your results against a book. And then, of course, the book that we've written and produced is designed to be used in all weathers. So it's perfectly fine to take it out on a wet day. And, if the pages get wet and sopping, you just buy another one. It's perfect system for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant, brilliant. There's some real top tips there for anyone who's wanted to publish a book. I've certainly gleaned quite a bit there. So if we take a step back then, so Mike, you haven't always done this, obviously. So there was a life before you got into this line of work. The theme of the podcast is really just people who live a life involved in the adventure industry. So what did life look like 20, 30 years ago, and what was that progression from you getting to where you are today?
You're limiting me to halfway back, aren't you?
That's right. That's being kind, Mike.
Yeah, it's been a life dominated by rock climbing, really. Once played with mountaineering and winter climbing and hill walking, but rock climbing has been constant from 18 into my 50s. I'm doing much less rock climbing now. I'm doing some of those things that I always thought I would do when I got older. And then I realised I was older, so I ought to get on and do them while I still can. So yeah, I've missed a few rock climbs, and that really hurts me. But I am having to create time to do these other things like bike packing and sea kayaking, and the sort of things that I'm trying to do now. And actually, I'm really discovering hill walking as well, because you start as a hill walker, so I'm into that. But you probably mean professionally. So until last summer, I worked for Brennan, the National Outdoor Centre in North Wales. And obviously, COVID's been a difficult time for that sector. And there was an opportunity to take voluntary redundancy came up last year. And that was just perfect for me, because I'd kind of done enough there. I've been there 15, 16 years. And I wanted to push into what I'm actually doing now and work with limiting that. So I got the voluntary redundancy and set up mikeraine.co.uk and the Nature of Snowdonia business. And it's really been great for me. Before Brennan, I was a teacher. So I was a geography teacher. So we're working, and before that, I worked in outdoor centres. So it's constantly been outdoor centres, working with young people, working in the outdoors the whole way through. There's no one pathway in this business. There's lots of different pathways that people will take. And, you know, you could always think, well, it could have gone a different way here or a different way there. You just got to take the opportunities to come along and remember that what you do makes you happy. You're working in a happy place in the outdoors, whatever the weather. And whilst you might not financially ever be the richest person, you can be comfortably well off, but you will also always be the richest person in experience and relationships, because it's just a great place to be.
They are wise words. It's fantastic. I'm really interested in the fact you're a geography teacher, because I too was a geography teacher, and I did things sort of the other way around than normal, I think, as in that I became an outdoor instructor. Did that for a number of years, and then trained and qualified to become a geography teacher. Then started teaching and realised it wasn't for me, and I almost immediately then came back to the outdoor, or being an outdoor instructor, and I've often reflected on that, whether had it been the other way round, had I not tasted the freedom and the wonderful. I'm a massive fan of working the outdoors. Obviously, that's what this podcast is about. I just wonder, and obviously training as a teacher has helped me in being an instructor and leading in the outdoors now hugely. And I wouldn't, I certainly don't regret that at all. But I guess that helps as well, doesn't it? When you're out with groups, if you're giving some insight, like you said, about the geology and about the environment that you're walking through, it's magical, because you're able to offer that on top.
It's great. I mean, to be honest, Tom, I went to teaching because I wanted to work in LEA centres. I worked in centres, went into teaching to get a teaching degree. Idea to come straight back into teaching, but back into outdoor centres. But I love teaching. I was really lucky. I got first job in Cornwall and taught in Camborne School, and it was great. It was great people. It was a great place to be, and you get settled, and you think you want a career and money and all that sort of thing. And one thing leads to another. But I mean, teaching is really good for me going climbing and. Living a good life, really. I enjoyed teaching. I left on a good note, but the opportunity to go to Brennan was quite old, really. I was 45 when the opportunity came up, so I thought, well, I'll give it a go for a couple of years, and see how it goes. And At that age, you do tend to get a bit stuck in places.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Not a bad place to be stuck, though.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, just down the road, actually, just down the road. So was there sort of any pivotal moments in your career when you just thought, wow, this is a big change? Obviously, you changed from the teaching to the outdoor instructing and such. But were there any moments at which you thought, wow, this is a big change that's going on right now?
I mean, there's been a few. I was a greengrocer when I left school, and I loved that, working on the market. It sounds like a really old black and white world nowadays, doesn't it? But fond memories of that business. But in business, you either stand still and wither, or you move forward and get bigger. And I wasn't motivated by finance, really. People were the interesting thing for me. So that's where the shift came. I was climbing quite well at the time. I thought, to be honest, I need to give myself the opportunity to climb as much as I can. I had a lot of mates climbing hard in the 80s. It was a great time to be climbing. But I thought, I can't really just give up a good business and go climbing on the dole. That doesn't work like that. So that's when I got an outdoor apprenticeship down in, the first one was at Brennan, actually, and then the Kent Mountain Centre. And turned into being an outdoor instructor, which I loved. Absolutely suited me down to the ground. But then, to stay in it, I went to be a teacher. And then again, I can remember, you get those little pictures in your head. I can remember walking down the corridor in Camborne School and pinching myself at 31, thinking, oh my God, I'm a teacher, this is amazing. So that was the next kind of 15 years. Then it was other changes in my life. It was changes to relationships, changes to family life, that sort of thing, whereby I found myself back in Yorkshire, just been near aging parents, that sort of thing. But stepping back to the classroom as well from senior management, and then the opportunity came at Brennan. So that was quite a shift then at that age to go back into the outdoors. It was tricky at the time, but it worked out okay. And then again, COVID's provided me the opportunity for a new life. Really, I've just blossomed since COVID, and it's suited me down to the ground. It has. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question there. It's a bit rambling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I like rambling.
Lots of changes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. If we begin to wrap up, and the way in which I like to end every podcast is just with 3 questions that I ask every guest. There's a bit of consistency then throughout the podcast journey. So the first question is, what piece of advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm not sure what the answer is, Tom. The bit of advice I was working to was one somebody else gave me. A chap called John Hattersley told me. He said, look, Mike, you need to be where you want to be before you're 50. Because once you're after 50, not many people want you. And believe me, I tried really hard to be where I wanted to be before I was 50. I didn't quite get where I wanted to be. But the problem was I was applying from Brennan. And, people say, why do you want to leave your job? I'm like, well, I don't particularly, because it's a really good job I've got. But I just quite fancy doing that job you've got going as well. So that wasn't a great line at interviews. And so it didn't get me where I perhaps wanted to be. I mean, it's all worked out in the end quite nicely. But so the advice I'd pass on is, I don't know if it's changed much these days. I doubt it has. Get where you want to be before you're 50. It's much harder to change jobs when you pass 50. Right, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that the physical aspect of the work you've been doing as well, I guess that plays a role. I'm often told, you won't be able to do that forever, etc. You need to kind of give way, all those things. My answer is always, well, I'll do it for as long as I can. But yeah, that is sound advice. 50. Yeah. Okay, I've got 10 years, Mike. 10 years. Cool. So the second question is, what valuable resource or resources, so it could be a book, YouTube channel, piece of equipment, blog, podcast, app, or other, can you recommend to others following a similar path to you?
Yeah, I mean, I do refer to Nature of Snowdonia quite a bit because there's too much in there for me to remember. So I do use it as a working document, as an aid memoir. Yeah. But to get to the stage where you're having that conversations, there is no one book. The idea of Nature of Snowdonia was to pull together stuff from different books. So moss book, lichen book, geology book, grasses book, you name it. You know, we're pulling the things that were relevant to mountain leads from different sources. So I have a big bookshelf with loads of amazing books on there, and some of the sort of modern books. I won't name them because there's too many. There's some really good books there. I've done blogs on books that people should read as mountain leaders. But do you know what, Tom? The internet's a bloody amazing place.
Yeah.
You know, you can find all sorts of stuff there. And as long as you think about the sources you're visiting and balance the sources and use a critical mind, then I know it's a bit vague, but a lot of it's on there. You'll go to websites like, I don't know, the Woodland Trust or the Wildlife Trust or First Nature, or, you know, there's several websites that will keep coming up that are really, really useful. So it's got too big and vague, I know, but it's the internet.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, I'm interested because you mentioned earlier on about the app that identified the plants. I mean, what's your view on those? Are they good? Are they accurate? Do you use one yourself?
Oh, they're amazingly good. I'm just been playing with one this autumn called Shroomify, because identifying fungus is difficult. It's difficult because they vary through their life to fungus, and a lot of them look pretty similar as well. So what it does is it teaches you what to look for when you're identifying a fungus. Now, it doesn't always give you the right answer because you've got that problem of fungus changing throughout its life. But they are pretty good and they're getting better all the time. I always equate it to a calculator. When you do a sum on a calculator, you've got a rough idea where the answer should be. And it's a bit the same with using an artificial intelligence app to identify flowers. You need to have a rough idea of whether that actually is the right answer or not. And you need to be critical of it.
Right. Brilliant. Shroomify. I'm going to have a look at that.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, great. And the last question, what would you like to see change about the industry in which you work, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're very much at the behest of market forces these days, and it's probably hard to battle against that, but I'm pretty devastated to see us losing traditional outdoor education centres. Now, some of those council-funded subsidised outdoor centres did need a change. You know, they did need to do things differently and better, but some of them are really doing that, and they're really, you know, there's one near me here. I just don't know what else they could do. You know, they're making ends meet, they're balancing the books, they're open, they're accessible, and the council has still decided to close it, and that's heartbreaking, really. I think somehow we've got to pervade mainstream life. You know, the Prime Minister, the First Minister, none of them know what outdoor education is. And our challenge is to get together as a sector, present a united front. Listen, if a minister wants to talk about the countryside, she just rings up the NFU or the Farmers Union for Wales. And who else? It's really hard for that minister to tap into climbers, hill walkers, runners, outdoor educationalists, and so on and so forth. She just doesn't know who represents the outdoor conservation and recreational lobbies. There's some good things in Wales. There's some alliances in Wales that are trying really hard. There are movements in England and UK as well trying to pull things together. But there's resistance to that because when you amalgamate bodies, you're always worried about your particular voice. But somehow we've got to find a way over that. And this is not about individual bits of the outdoors. It's about the whole of the outdoors being together, recognising and working together and getting a message across to government that we can help. We can help with the burden on the NHS because we can get people doing accessible activities, accessible exercise. Everybody can walk, cycle, swim, kayak, whatever. And we also, it's good for mental health because we're outside in nature and we're having conversations. And it's these really simple things that could, I think, make a massive difference to people, and therefore that's an investment in your population that we can really, really help with. And I just wish we could get that message across to government, because it's not complicated and it's not expensive, but bloody hell, it's hard.
Fabulous words. Yeah, absolutely. I was interested to see a couple of outdoor centres that I do a little bit of freelancing with recently, and going down and speaking to them about, obviously the conversation comes out about COVID and what they've actually done over COVID. And then, they've taken the time to repaint, to clean everything up, to make it, and they're completely transformed them. But to hear that still isn't enough is, oh dear. I hope that changes. I really hope it does. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for your time. And hopefully we'll maybe in the future have time for round 2. And hopefully at some point we could go out for a walk down the road somewhere. But I don't know what it looks like outside for you, but here it is blue skies. So I'm sure you've got... Yeah, I'm sure you've got a day to be getting on with. So thanks again, Mike, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much, Tom. Bye-bye.